Today's section is about blood and the lymphatic system. So first of all, we've talked already about the function of blood is to get nutrients and oxygen to the body's cells and remove waste products and carbon dioxide from the body's cell. So that's the transportation system part of it. The various parts of the blood can help regulate body temperature, fight infections, and produce clots that minimize body fluid loss from wounds. The liquid part of the blood is called plasma. Every human body contains 4 to 6 liters of blood, so between 2 and 2 liters, if you think about it that way. So you can visualize the amount there. About 55% of that, so over half, is the liquid part of the blood called plasma. It's kind of yellowish colored. 90% of that plasma is water, and the rest is dissolved gases, salts, nutrients, enzymes, hormones, waste products, plasma proteins, cholesterol, and other important compounds. The water helps control body temperature, so it aids in homeostasis. There are 3 different types of plasma proteins: albumin, globulins, and fibrinogen. Albumin and globulins transport substances like fatty acids, hormones, and vitamins. Albumin helps regulate osmotic pressure, which is water pressure due to osmosis, and blood volume. Some globulins can fight viral and bacterial infections, and then fibrinogen helps form blood clots. The most numerous cells in the blood are red blood cells. Those are called erythrocytes, and their main job is to transport oxygen. Red blood cells are red because they contain a protein called hemoglobin, which has iron in it. This protein binds oxygen and releases it in capillary networks throughout the body. And then these red blood cells pick up carbon dioxide and carry it back to the lungs. Red blood cells are kind of the shape of a jelly donut. They're round, they don't have a hole in the middle, but they're a little bit sunken. They're produced by cells in the red bone marrow. As they fill with hemoglobin, their nuclei and other organelles are forced out. So this is the only type of cell in the human body that doesn't have a nucleus. Red blood cells circulate for 120 days before they're destroyed. They're broken down in the liver and in the spleen. White blood cells are also known as leukocytes, and they help fight infections, parasites, and they attack bacteria. If the body has an infection, you'll see that in a person's blood work because there would be a higher number of white blood cells there. These are produced from stem cells in the bone marrow, but these do keep their nuclei and they can live for years. They're not confined to blood vessels. They can slip through capillary walls to attack foreign organisms, foreign invaders. Different types of white blood cells do different things. Macrophages swallow up pathogens like bacteria and viruses. Lymphocytes help out with the immune response. B lymphocytes produce antibodies that fight infection and provide immunity from further infections. T lymphocytes help fight tumors and viruses. In someone who's healthy, white blood cells are outnumbered by red blood cells by almost 1,000 to 1. So again, the most numerous blood cell in our system is red blood cells. And there's 1,000 more red blood cells for every white blood cell in our system. Platelets help with blood clots. And basically what this is made up of is the cytoplasm of certain bone marrow cells divides into thousands of small membrane-enclosed fragments that break off. It's basically broken pieces of cell. Plasma proteins also help with the blood clotting process. When platelets come in contact with the edges of a broken blood vessel, their surface becomes sticky and they cluster around the wound. That's what you see happening here. The platelets then release a clotting factor called thromboplastin, and it converts the protein prothrombin into the enzyme thrombin. Next step is that thrombin, through the process of another conversion, thrombin converts the soluble plasma protein fibrinogen, into fibrin filaments, which actually form the clot. On the outside, we see this as a scab, if we have a skinned knee or whatever. The clot seals the damaged area and prevents further blood loss. Now, the lymphatic system is a different circulatory system altogether. Blood passes through the capillaries. Some blood cells and components of plasma move through the capillary walls and into the fluid between cells. They carry nutrients, dissolved oxygen, and salts to those cells. Most of this fluid that's known as lymph is reabsorbed, but not all of it. The rest of it goes into the lymph system. There are vessels, nodes, and organs that collect the lymph that leaves the capillaries, screens it for microorganisms, and returns it to the circulatory system. Lymph system is also involved in the absorption of nutrients and in immunity. Lymph collects in capillaries that conducts it into larger and larger lymph vessels, much like what we see in the circulatory system. Lymph vessels have valves, similar to veins, that move the lymph along and prevent it from flowing backwards. Pressure on the lymph vessels from muscles helps move the lymph through the system into larger and larger ducts. So, sounds familiar, very much like the movement through veins. These ducts return lymph to the blood through openings in the subclavian veins just below the shoulders. When there's injury or disease that blocks these vessels, lymph can accumulate, causing swelling. That's called edema. Lymph system also helps absorb nutrients. There's a system of vessels that run alongside the intestines that picks up fats and fat-soluble vitamins from the digestive system and transports those nutrients into the bloodstream. Lymph nodes are shaped like beans, and they're scattered along the lymph vessels throughout the body. The ones you might be most familiar with are right under our jawline on either side of our neck. They act as filters. They trap microorganisms, stray cancer cells, and debris as lymph flows through them. White blood cells inside them engulf or otherwise destroy the trash. So when our lymph nodes become swollen, it's an indication that there's some sort of an infection that's being fought off. Those filters are becoming full of microorganisms or other junk. These are the swollen glands that you hear about. Symptoms of infections when their microorganisms are trapped. The lymph system includes a couple different organs called the thymus and the spleen. The thymus is located beneath the sternum. You can see it right here. This is where T lymphocytes mature before they can function in the immune system. So the thymus produces components of the immune system. Blood flows through the spleen, where it's filtered of microorganisms and debris. It also removes old or damaged blood cells and stores platelets, which again play a role in clotting. Diseases of the circulatory system can be on the down low. and not be discovered for a lot of years. Unfortunately, often the first sign is an event that affects the heart or the brain, which are pretty important organs in our body. Tissues in the heart and the brain begin to die within moments if they don't get oxygen. Damage to heart muscle from a heart attack or to the brain from a stroke can be fatal. People with high blood pressure are at increased risk for heart disease and stroke, and heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States. Like we said, the heart muscle needs oxygen. Coronary arteries and their smaller branches are what do that. The most common types of heart disease happen when those vessels are obstructed. Atherosclerosis is what usually does that. Fatty deposits called plaques build up in artery walls, cause the arteries to stiffen. Those plaques can clog, either restrict blood flow or completely clog it. This can result in chest pain, known as angina, and that can be a sign of restricted blood flow. The heart can be weakened or damaged by oxygen deprivation, and this is called heart failure. If the cap on a plaque ruptures, a clot may form that completely blocks an artery. Clots can form in large vessels in other parts of the body, break off, and block blood vessels that are narrowed by atherosclerosis. And you can see what's going on with that situation right here. Here's the plaque building up. The cap ruptures, blood clot forms and blocks the artery, or the clot dislodges and blocks a smaller artery. A heart attack occurs as heart muscle cells become damaged and possibly die due to oxygen deprivation. Heart attacks can damage the SA or AV nodes, which affects the coordination of the heartbeat. Drugs can also lead to a heart attack. Cocaine, cigarette smoking among two of them among the drugs. Symptoms of heart attack include nausea, shortness of breath, chest pain, pain in the neck, jaw, or left arm. They need immediate medical attention, people who have these symptoms. Medication needs to be given quickly to increase blood flow and save the heart muscle. Brain cells, when their blood supply is interrupted, can die, and that's called a stroke. Some strokes are caused by a blood clot that blocks a blood vessel in the brain. A stroke can also occur if a weak blood vessel breaks and cause bleeding in the brain. Symptoms can include severe headache, numbness, dizziness, confusion, trouble seeing or speaking. Results of a stroke vary depending on which part of the brain it affects, which makes sense if you recall what we learned about the nervous system last chapter. Some strokes are fatal. Some can cause paralysis or speech issues. Prompt medical treatment can lessen the severity of a stroke. High blood pressure is also known as hypertension. It's generally defined as 140/90, and that's systolic, diastolic, or higher. People can have high blood pressure for years and not know it. Meanwhile, though, heart damage occurs as the heart struggles to push blood through the vessels. Hypertension can cause small tears in blood vessels, which can lead to atherosclerosis. And then the stiffened arteries that result from that contribute to the high blood pressure. Diet, exercise, and prescription drugs can help control hypertension, but uncontrolled hypertension can lead to heart attack, stroke, and kidney damage. Diseases that affect the circulatory system do not have a single cause. There are several risk factors that can contribute. Diet and exercise levels are ones that can be controlled. Age and family history cannot. People just have to be aware of them. Here's some interesting facts. Controllable risk factors are on this side. Diet, exercise, weight, not smoking, high blood cholesterol, high blood pressure, and diabetes. uncontrollable age, family history, and gender. Men have more heart attacks on average than women. Cholesterol was mentioned in the table on the previous slide. It's a lipid that is part of animal cell membranes. It's a necessary thing. We hear cholesterol in a bad light, but it has to be there. It also helps synthesize hormones, bile, and vitamin D. Cholesterol is transported in the blood by two types of lipoproteins, LDLs and HDLs. LDL is the cholesterol carrier that's most likely to cause trouble because it becomes part of plaque. That's considered to be the bad cholesterol. HDL is often called the good cholesterol. It transports excess cholesterol from the tissues to the liver for removal from the body. The liver manufactures cholesterol, and then it's transported through the blood to tissues. We also consume cholesterol in meat, eggs, dairy products, and fried foods, especially if those foods are high in saturated or trans fats. There's an association that's been made between high cholesterol levels and atherosclerosis, and as well as a higher risk for heart attack. Nobel Prize was given in 1985 to these researchers who figured out what controls the levels of cholesterol in the blood. They discovered LDL receptors on the cell membrane of liver cells that bind LDL and take it into cells. You see that happening here in step 1. Once inside, cholesterol is broken down and then stored or used for making bile or more cholesterol. Right here. When blood cholesterol levels are high, livers take cholesterol from the blood and do not make it. They break it down. When blood cholesterol levels are low, the liver produces it. These researchers, Brown and Goldstein, also found that some people have a genetic predisposition that affect their LDLs. They can carry genes that produce defective LDL receptors, and that causes two problems. Without working LDL receptors, liver cells can't remove the cholesterol from the blood. The second problem is the liver cells don't get the signal to stop producing cholesterol. So people with defective LDL receptors have very high cholesterol levels even if they don't eat much cholesterol or fat. They learned that people who eat high-fat diets store excess cholesterol in their liver cells. Those cells stop making LDL receptors and removing cholesterol from the blood. So there's this, like the dopamine. If there's a high amount of LDLs in the blood, the LDL receptors are not made anymore, cholesterol's not getting removed. The excess cholesterol doesn't have anywhere to go except in the arteries, and that creates plaques, atherosclerosis, increased risk of heart attack and stroke. A diet that's high in cholesterol can cause symptoms similar to those of a genetic disease, and that condition is called familial hypercholesterolemia. This work led to the development of drugs that can help people with high cholesterol. There's a drug called statins that block the synthesis of cholesterol in liver cells, which stimulates the liver to produce more LDL receptors, which then remove the excess cholesterol from the blood. Preventing heart disease starts now, when you're young. Balanced diet, regular exercise, not smoking. Healthy diet lowers the risk of your liver failing to regulate cholesterol properly, can protect your arteries from atherosclerosis. Exercise strengthens your heart muscle and helps your circulatory system work better. Never starting to smoke will protect your circulatory system from the many dangerous chemicals in smoke.